Thank you, Finn. So welcome everyone, it's great to be here. I'm Lauren Walsh, SheEO Development Guide. I am living on Miwok and Pomo land in Sonoma County, California. And for the past 5 years, I've worked with many SheEO ventures, helping them scale. And prior to my involvement with SheEO, I was a managing partner with a global accelerator, founder.org, and dispersing funds for with a $100 million fund and 150 early stage disruptive companies in the portfolio. So I'm very excited to be here tonight and talking about becoming memorable, how to pitch successfully, because it's an area of passion that I have, and especially helping SheEOs pitch effectively and making it less painful, frankly. So I'll be sharing with you a template and a framework and a process for creating memorable pitches that get very powerful results. And I also want to say that I'm thrilled that we have Connie Stacy, the founder and CEO of Growing Greener Innovations, who will join us and provide their perspective on this topic real time in terms of their perspective and also their stories and successes, because they've been quite successful at their pitches and building their company. So from the agenda perspective, as I mentioned, I'll be talking about the pitch framework, and then Connie will share her thoughts, and then we're going to move into a discussion and breakouts, and we'll have breakouts for 3 SheEOs and activators and ventures together in breakout rooms for about 15 minutes, and then we'll all come back and have a brief wrap-up discussion. So that's what we're up to today, and then I'm going to hold questions in terms of the chat until I think either Connie may want to respond to questions in a moment, but I'm going to go through this material so that we can actually have a Q&A after the fact, after you've had breakouts. All right, so let's take a look at our first slide here. So this is I want to start here with the strategic context. And the first tool that I'm going to share with you is called the pitch checklist. And this is also lovingly known as the 5 C's. And the art of memorable pitching begins with adopting the mindset of an investor, whether they are an angel investor, head of a fund, family and friends. I want to really focus on adopting and maintaining that mindset throughout our time together today, because that's really the beginning. That's kind of the super sauce of success in regards to this approach. And we developed the 5C impact checklist because over the past 10 years, I and other SheEO venture guides have attended hundreds of pitches and engaged in investor discussions that take place directly following the presentations. And the 5C checklist, what we have up on the slide here, actually reflects the questions that funders and investors ask each other and themselves immediately after you, the CEO or founder, leave the Zoom call or before COVID, the room. So let's take a look at the questions and how and this is really in a sequential framework here in terms of what does that discussion look like. So investors begin debriefs of the pitches, first of all, assessing the level of clarity. And the questions they ask themselves and each other is, was it immediately evident the problem venture is solving and why this problem is important to the larger society? And also, is there a sense of urgency in terms of addressing this problem? So after that discussion, we talk about, was the venture story actually compelling? Is the product or service unique? Have they proven product market fit? Will there be recurring revenue as a result of that uniqueness? Is the total addressable market large enough for the company to grow over time? Those are some of the questions that actually define compelling from an investor perspective. Then we move into the personal connection. Did I actually feel a connection to this founder or CEO? Did they structure their story in a way that was actually personally relevant to me as an investor? If I feel a connection with them, do I believe, are they credible that they're able to take this company to the next level? Were they able to articulate a holistic understanding of the key dimensions of company building, which includes a strong go-to-market strategy, credible revenue goals, a business model that they can explain, a team that sounds like it's high performing? Do they understand the competitive landscape? Do they have a compelling product roadmap? Are they able to identify and validate year-over-year growth? Do they understand what their company valuation is at this moment in time, regardless of whether or not they're an early stage startup? And do they already have a sense of the funding terms that they would be comfortable with? And finally, if I feel that they've managed all of those questions very effectively, am I eager to learn more about this founder and CEO as an individual, and also what they're up to in terms of the impact that they're creating? So that's what we call the 5C checklist. And this can seem a little daunting, but the good news is we have a process for you to be prepared for killing it on the pitch checklist. So I'm going to go to the next slide and talk about what do we do in terms of where do we start in terms of this becoming more proactive and having a process in place where we can actually continue to think and anticipate what is on the mind of the investor as they are listening to our pitch, and create the kind of pitch that would actually be much more memorable for them and relevant. So the starting place is with the SWOT analysis. So investors are often leaders in their industry, successful entrepreneurs, they're business executives who generally, and these are the ones that we want to interact with, want to make a positive impact on society globally. Most importantly, they're hopefully, usually big picture thinkers, constantly scanning the external horizon for emerging trends, such as unrealized business product opportunities, societal issues, and as well competitive threats to existing status quo, maybe in their industry or in other industries that they have a passion around, and solving big problems. So they will conduct a SWOT analysis on your business before listening to your pitch. And that's why starting with the SWOT analysis is so important. They are going to want to understand and confirm your internal strengths and weaknesses as a company, as a business, and a founder. They want to be confident that you're paying attention to the emerging opportunities in your industry. And they want to know that you are developing strategies for anticipated competitive threats. So that's top of mind even before they come in to listen to your pitch or they take a look at your deck. So for this reason, we start with the SWOT and consider the SWOT as actually more of a discipline and an ongoing way that you are staying fresh and connected to potential investors and what they care about. Almost like it's like an ongoing discipline, I would say. Now, there's a little fun fact on the SWOT analysis, which is that Steve Jobs launched the iPhone exclusive partnership with AT&T by drawing a SWOT analysis on the back of a napkin during a pitch lunch with the AT&T COO, Randall Stevenson. And this was after Verizon had passed on the very same SWOT analysis on the napkin. So I think that CEO probably regretted that to this day. I've often witnessed investors build SWOT analysis on the back of their, whatever they have at hand, or even on their phones at this point, while listening to a venture pitch. And then that directs them in terms of the questions that they're going to ask because they didn't have sufficient data in one of these quadrants. So I'm not going to give you an example today of how to fill out a SWOT analysis. I'd be happy to take that offline in the future. We don't really have the time today, but just in terms of what I want to make sure everyone understands is that this is step one. So let's move to step two. After you've completed your SWOT analysis, the next step in the process is to conduct due diligence on your prospective investors that will be at the pitch, either, as I mentioned, on Zoom call or actually in a room if once we are back face to face. Connie's going to share detailed examples of how they curate pitches in the investor audience from their perspective. However, my goal is to share with you the tool and the process. that will ensure that your narrative inspires a strong personal connection with your audience. If we go back to the 5 C's and think about the connection, what is compelling, and how you curate that connection in terms of the stakeholder analysis, and how does one do that? From the perspective of being ready as you craft your story. How do you know what's going to be most relevant to that investor? So what do? Well, we've provided some suggested areas of deep dive in terms of questions that you need to answer and where you should look for that information. So the first place to start is, what industry perspective are they going to bring to the discussion? And you can certainly, when we're thinking about where do we get this information, certainly Google, LinkedIn, Fortune Magazine, Crunchbase, Quora, there are a lot of other sources to build the stakeholder matrix. But most importantly, you're building a profile on each of your investors so that you understand, you can anticipate their questions by having this discipline, as well as curate the deck in a way that will prioritize what matters to them. So some typical questions that I find are really helpful in terms of understanding and building a powerful profile is certainly not only what in terms of their industry, what do they bring to the discussion, their perspective, but what are they known for personally and professionally? Even down to what universities do they attend? Where have they worked? What patents do they own? What have they brought to market? What kind of companies have they led? What causes and pursuits are they passionate about? What topics do they publish on? What charities do they contribute to? What personal hardships have they endured? And who have they invested in, and at what level in the past? And also helpful to consider, how would they create a SWOT on your venture based on these questions and this profile? What would they emphasize? What will they be able to accomplish if your venture is successful? So this is just a starting point in terms of building that profile of who this investor is on a personal level. The information's all out there, and taking the time, and certainly also in many of the ventures that I work with, they spend a month or two actually in creating influence networks, determining how much they can learn about this person, and then also potentially even meeting them before they do a pitch to build that rapport and connection. So if we go to the next slide, moving on. As I mentioned before, doing a full stakeholder analysis is going to help you anticipate what questions they will ask, what concerns they have. You're going to actually go into the pitch better prepared to be able to respond or anticipate what concerns they will have, potentially what they're going to be excited about, and already have practiced responding. That's not only going to help your credibility, but it's going to make you more relevant and credible and memorable, and actually allow for a deeper conversation to take place in the limited time that you usually have in regards to pitching. So now that you've been using, you've created your SWOT, we are going to move to step 4. You've anticipated the questions you might have, you've done your due diligence in terms of your stakeholder analysis, and you're finally ready for the pitch framework worksheet. So we actually have a worksheet that we're going to put up on our on Slack, which you'll be able to use. And I'm going to give you a simple example that one of the ventures actually created this morning at my request. So I appreciated that she was so willing to respond quickly to my ask here. So what are we doing here in terms of the pitch framework worksheet? Okay. The goal here is to be as memorable as possible and succinct in 2 to 3 minutes. Many of you have participated in either judging or just simply determining whether a venture is going to make the finalist selection in terms of the SheEO process and becoming a finalist. And this is actually what we look for very succinctly in terms of the flow of what we're listening for. So what problem are they, starting with 5 easy steps here. The context, what problem are they solving? Why is important now? And you'll notice that this is actually reflecting the checklist. What vision are they bringing? What is their unique solution? Why do they exist? What traction? What have they accomplished? What is their go-to-market revenue funds, et cetera? Is all of that in clear and easily discernible? What impact have they already achieved? What's the difference that they're making? Do they have an example? Do they have a use case that they can quickly explain, and is it compelling? And then what level of funding are they asking for? Are they making an ask that makes sense? How will they apply the funds? How will those funds help scale their impact? And I want to give Kyla Bolden actually credit for this in terms of providing one last step here, which is the invitation to partner. Did they make that invitation clear? Was it bold? And did they clarify the next steps? So I'm going to move now to an example of what this looks like in real time. So this is Kyla Bolden is one of our 2021 Canadian SheEO Ventures finalists, and her company is WizKid Coding. I sent these questions out to her this morning, and she quickly came back with her answers, which could be a 2 to 3 minute pitch to an investor. She's actually currently raising 1.7 million US. And with that, she's actively involved in conversations, probably 10 a day, with potential investors. So she was able to quickly get this back to me. So from the perspective of considering, what do we need to hear about WizKid Coding? So the context, what problem is she solving? Schools and organizations globally don't deliver integrated STEM curriculum until high school. Extracurricular STEM classes are expensive, generic, and boring. And parents around the world want affordable and engaging STEM extracurricular educational opportunities so that their children can actually get a leg up instead of waiting until high school, when often they are diverted out of a STEM curriculum or STEM path in regards to work opportunities. So what is the vision that WizKid Coding is bringing? What is unique about their solution and their value proposition? They have online group and collaborative classes. Competitors only do one-to-one instruction. They are affordable because of the online platform that Kyla is creating. The other providers' delivery model is very expensive, and they're completely focused on the future and what students will be needing in terms of where work is headed, rather than where it has the legacy in regards to the way STEM jobs have been created in the past. It's also creating a globalized learning environment, which is absolutely what we're going to need in the future. What traction has WizKid Coding achieved? Very clear 200% revenue growth year over year, significant growth margins, and this is just a snapshot. And then plans for the upcoming year in regards to the contracts she would share. So what is the impact? What difference have they achieved thus far? She's got a quick use case. She's already partnering with cities to create a sense of inclusion and access, as opposed to just one-on-one mentors and teachers. The number of students are in the thousands that she's already that are already on the platform in 30 countries. And she has quite a few very compelling testimonials from the students themselves about the way in which this learning opportunity using Zoom has changed their lives. Her funding ask is very clear. She's going to focus on 3 areas: hiring, marketing, and technology. She's got a product roadmap that she's putting together. And in the final, her final ask, which I thought was brilliant, is her ultimate sharing with us today, is that as a venture, she's early stage growth, and as well her first entrepreneurial endeavor. And yet at the same time, she feels that she's very bold. She wants all of her investors to understand the big picture. She's inviting them to be part of this journey rather than asking them to get involved. She is the perfect one to do the job. And that's what she wants to leave her investors, her prospective investors with, which is that they can be confident that she's credible and she's willing to take the company to the next level in terms of impact as well as financials. So I am going to pass the baton at this time to Connie Stacy, who's going to bring this alive in a much more visceral way than what I've done thus far.
Visceral, I like it. I like it. Is it okay? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I think you've already given me the ability to do that, Finn, but I'll let you know if it doesn't go. Can you see my screen okay, Lauren? I can see.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to run you through a little bit of, oops, sorry, I moved it. I hope you guys didn't get that crazy blur for a second there. A little bit of what I do and kind of what I find to be some successful tips. So first off, my company is Growing Greener Innovations. We're a social enterprise, and our mission is to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions and bring an end to energy poverty. So it's a big mission. And through this process, I've done a lot of pitching, a lot of different kinds of pitches. And I've been very fortunate. I've been quite successful with them. So the Dragon's Den is Canada's version of the Shark Tank, if you're familiar with the show, and I was offered a deal, which I ultimately turned down. Recently won the Pitch for the Purse, which was a Canadian national contest with a $50,000 prize, and a number of other ones. So fairly versed in this topic, so hopefully I have something to offer for you. So first off, I'm going to hazard a guess that many of you are thinking, oh, I've never pitched before, or oh, I'm not very good at this. You are. People have this idea that a pitch is a competition or it's Shark Tank, but a pitch is actually just offering an idea or trying to compel someone to something that you think. So you're trying to sell something like an idea. And it might be as simple as, honey, I think we should get Chinese for dinner instead of Thai. And that's still you pitching your idea. So we've all done it, and we've done it thousands of times. So wipe your brain of this idea that you don't do it and you haven't done it before, because you have. Now, one of the first things I like to look at when I'm thinking about pitches is what kind of pitch am I doing and what is the purpose of the pitch? Now, obviously, we're going to focus on business reasons today, but they still vary quite a bit. It's pitch competitions. It can be virtual presentations. It can be keynote presentations. It can be panels. And it can be things like direct customer sales, face-to-face, and so many more. But the most important thing here, and Lauren really put this on the table, and I think this is the most important part, winning a pitch is not getting a check. Winning a pitch is them at the end saying, tell me more, right? Because nowhere on the planet, even in the Shark's Tank, Dragon's Den world, do you actually get a check at the end of your pitch. I came off that stage and I had to meet with lawyers and talk about due diligence and all of those things. So, very, very rarely is there actually a check that's at the end of a pitch. It's always a process, and that process is really about getting them to want to know more. So being prepared, research is one of the absolute key things that you can do. And I think Lauren really, again, Lauren and I got to have some discussion about this beforehand, and she really nails it with her worksheet there. And part of that has to do with understanding your audience and being in their shoes, taking their perspective. So, for example, if I'm presenting to this group, well, I know that SheEO is a collection of amazingly generous women who are taking on the world's to-do list. So you most likely care about, that my goal is to bring an end to energy poverty. That's important to me, and I know it's probably important to you. So that's a good one for me to share. But you might not be interested in something like that the battery energy storage market is one of the fastest growing markets in the world with a compound annual growth rate of over 20%. You don't care because it's not really what you're looking for. But the Intel Capital Group or other VCs, that's really important information. So making sure that you're putting the right information with the right group, and even within organizations, who is the particular people you're talking to? So, I use NASA as just an example, but if you're talking to really technical people, your presentation is different than if you're talking to finance people or safety people. So if I'm talking to a safety person about batteries, I talk about things like protection from thermal runaway and safety reports and things like that. If I'm talking to the finance person, I'm talking about cost savings and opportunities for efficiency. If I'm talking to the power systems engineer, I'm going to get really technical and talk about battery
Hi,
chemistries.
I don't want to interrupt you, but just so you know, your slides are still in the first thing. I'm not
Oh
exactly sure
no!
why. I just wanted to let
Oh,
you know you were on such a roll and so amazing and such good energy. I just wanted to let you know about that.
is it? Maybe it's because I moved the screen. Can you see the current slide now? Be prepared.
Yeah, perfect.
Yes. Oh, I don't know why I did that. Okay, sorry, my bad. You missed some
No
good
worries.
pitch. Anyway, thanks, Ben, for jumping in with that. So yeah, like if you're talking to someone who's really technical, like a power systems engineer, you know, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to talk about things like charging schemas. But again, that doesn't matter to you as a member SheEO, and it might not understanding who your audience is. I do. And I, again, Lauren, I love how much you and I think alike. One of the things I have always done, you totally validate me. Thank you. I appreciate it. Because some of these things are things I've always done. So in high school, for example, if I had to prepare for a debate in a class, the very first thing I did is I said, okay, you know, let's say the debate is what's more important, energy poverty or scarcity of food. And what I would do is if I was supposed to talk on energy poverty, the first thing I would do is I would actually make a list of all the important things that I would say for scarcity of food and why it's more important. And then I would make a list of why I think that energy poverty counters those things is more important. So I actually made my first list of things about what they would say against it so that I'm prepared to answer questions that might be really tough. And that's something I still do now is I look at what are they going to hit me with? What might be the negative things that they're going to say so that I have time to prepare those questions before I get hit in a life scenario. Okay, so nerves, absolutely 100% of people get that. I think if somebody says they never get nervous, I'm not sure I buy it. As many pitches as I have done, I have never not been nervous. Every single one, I am being red in the face. My hands are shaking. I'm usually desperate for a bathroom break about 2 minutes before, trying to figure out how I'm going to squeeze that in before I have to actually start. And that's okay. You don't actually have to be calm to be successful. Nervousness doesn't mean that you can't be successful. It's okay. And it's okay. People are going to expect some level of nervousness. If you weren't nervous, it probably means you don't really care. Would you want to really work with or invest in a company or a founder who didn't care? Nervousness is okay. You don't have to feel bad about that. Again, the whole idea of knowing your answers and not your words. So this is a particular trick that I do. I know a lot of people when they do pitches like to memorize out exactly what they're going to say. I don't. And this is something that's a personal preference. I find if I thought I was going to say, the compound annual growth of batteries is 20%. And I say the annual growth year after year is 20%. I might stumble because I'm like, oh, crap, that wasn't what I was going to say. And it makes me really instead is I focus on what is the point of this slide. And I have 1 point per slide generally. So I say, okay, the point of this slide is that the market is big and growing. And that way, if I change my words, I don't get flustered because I know that I've still got my point across. Now, this is a personal preference one. If you're somebody like me who really gets kind of antsy, if you've said the wrong thing, you were thinking of exactly this way, then maybe try focusing on the idea of knowing the answer or the point you're trying to get across instead of the specific words. Frame your responses in the positive. And I'm happy to share the link afterwards, but there's a great TED talk by, I think her name is Dana Kantz. It was a professor out of, anyway, I won't bother to go into the detail of it, but she does a great presentation on unconscious bias and how it affects women entrepreneurs. And one of the things that happens often for women entrepreneurs is people ask a question and frame it in the negative. So the example might be, the male entrepreneur gets asked, wow, this is a really exciting market. How are you going to handle the scaling of this? Whereas the female entrepreneur might get asked, This is a competitive space with a lot of new entrants. How are you going to hold on to that market share? So now the question is actually the same, but instead of responding to the negative, what I would say is, wow, you know what? Batteries is such a huge and growing space that even Tesla had to pull its products from Canada because it can't keep up with the market. So we're really confident that we can make and establish ourselves in the market and offer something unique. And that's a really positive way to answer something that was posed as a negative question. That's a really important one, because what you don't want to do is go scramble and be like, well, we have good relationships and we can do this or we can do that. Look for the positive, give them the positive. Be concise. One of the things I think that can be a mistake is sometimes people put too much on a single slide and you don't remember. If I asked you to look back, well, maybe you would, but if you looked back at that original slide that I had with all of those logos, could you tell me what the logos were? Probably not. Maybe the one or two that I specifically pointed out, but most of them you probably wouldn't remember because there's too much on the slide for you to remember. Now, luckily, that wasn't my point in this case. What I was doing was actually giving credibility that I have done this before and I've done it successfully. But if my point was to tell you that on that slide, I was selected as one of Canada's top 50 change makers by the Globe and Mail, you would have missed it because there was too much on the slide. So being concise is really important, and own it. Own it. Now, one of the things, and so this is one of my favorite tricks, one of the best ways to be successful is about having permission to sell. Now, this is a little bit different than the idea of pitching to an investor in a formal pitch arrangement, but it's about creating the relationship and having permission to sell. So if anybody's ever walked into a store and then the salespeople swarm you and they're like, how can I help you? And, and they're commission people, you're like, oh God, stop, back up. Everybody tends to shy away from that because you don't want to be swarmed. And if you think about it, if you thought about it like a date, because this is a relationship, would you go on a second date with somebody who spent the entire first date talking about themselves? I probably wouldn't. So why would you? So if you're selling to them and you want to build a relationship, which is absolutely crucial, then you need to know about them. So one of the tricks I do, for example, is when I'm at trade shows, I go around to different booths and I stop at a booth and I say, wow, okay, this looks cool. Tell me about what you do. And they start talking and they tell me about their product or their service. And I start to investigate. Oh, okay, you do that. Really? You're in events. Wow. Okay. Do you do a lot of outdoor events? Wow. Power might be an issue there. Tell me more about that. What I'm also doing is I'm researching how can my product help them? So I'm learning about them, what their needs are, but I'm also learning how I may or may not be able to help them. So I use that to get a whole pile of intel. And then 9 times out of 10, the person after they've shared a fair bit will say, wow, tell me about you. What do you do? And now they've given you permission to sell. When you have permission to sell, they're listening. They're actively listening, wanting to know. And that's when you've got a really magic moment. Because most of the time people don't want to be sold to. But when you get permission to sell, oh, world's your oyster. Clarity. So lots of times, like I said, we put too much on the screen or we clutter our message. You don't have to do, you don't have to say a million words. Sometimes the most important things, it's that drop the mic moment, right? So when my $50,000 pitch for the purse that I won, they came back and the last question they said, why do you think you should win this competition? And I said, because I have the ability to bring power to every corner of the globe, and I can do it today. Well, drop the mic. You don't have to use all 30 seconds. You don't have to use all 60 seconds. That's a compelling statement. And it's okay for silence. If you talk too much, and trust me, I have a tendency for that, then you sometimes clutter your message. So clarity is really, really important. And the last one I'll say is really around passion. Sometimes people think they have to be all business and really, really, put on that business hat and be very serious. You're not a robot. Why would you act like a robot? People who want to build a relationship want to build it with a person. They want to know that you're going to stick around and support your product or your service. And if it's really just feels like business and very disconnected, then you don't have, it's like Lauren said, it's connection. You don't have that buy-in from that. Showing your passion is a good thing. In fact, probably the number one feedback I had for the first 3 years when I first started pitching and selling my product was people would come back to me and they would say, "You are so passionate about what you do." And the reality was it took them forever to understand how my batteries work because it's complicated tech. But I didn't need them to. I needed them to believe that I was onto something important and that I was going to stick by it. And they did. They believed it. And that's what you have to do too. I mean, at the end of the day, you already know your stuff and you wouldn't be doing this business and part of SheEO if you didn't believe in it. So let them see it. I think that's one of the most important things that you can do. I love that Finn's cat is back. Wow, thank you. Awesome. Love the audience. Interactive. It's one of the most important things you can do. Creating connection at the end of the day is what all of this is about. A raise process is long. We're literally just closing our first raise. It looks like it'll close out at 7.5 million. So it's big and it's been a long process. It's been 6 months and apparently that's fast, which is terrifying, I know, right? But it's a long process and the people who are our investors are people I now know well and know me. Because they're, after all, they're taking a big risk by saying, can Connie pull this off, right? Because there's other companies out there that make batteries. Obviously, mine's the best. But there's other companies that make batteries that are going to say that theirs is the best. So why would they invest in me? They're investing in you as a person. And you got to show them who you are and that it's important to you and you're not going to quit. Because the vast majority of startups are done by year 5. They're gone. So why are you going to make it? Show your passion, show why you do it. And that is something that will stick with your audience always. I could talk about this forever, but I want to make sure we have time to do all the cool worksheet stuff that Lauren has. So I'm going to zip it and I'm going to pass it back over.
Thanks, Connie. So we're going to go, I mean, I could listen to you all day and night. Loved it. So we're going to take a moment now to go into our breakouts. And we're providing you with a couple questions to talk to each other about. Please feel free to go in any direction you want to go in. We thought it potentially would be helpful to, and we'll put this in the chat as well. You know, what insights did you have from what we've shared today? What might you do differently going forward? Or what you want to make sure that you keep? Because what I really appreciated, Connie, about what you mentioned is about the passion, authenticity, all that's so important. So we'll have breakouts for approximately, Renee, around 10, maybe 12 minutes. What do we think in terms of timing? Just to give everyone a sense. Probably 12 minutes. I think she's putting us into our breakouts.
Welcome back, everyone. Over to Lauren.
So I hope your conversations were great. And I would love to hear if anybody has any questions. We have a few minutes. So these can be questions of each other, Connie or myself.
Margaret here. I have a question. Old-fashioned marketing was always like, what is the need of the customer? You know, what does the product address in terms of the need of the customer? And I've noticed now we're talking about more what is the problem being addressed. Do you think it's a case of semantics, or is there a shift in how we provide the products and deliver and structure and create the products that we do for the market, modern market?
I think that's a great question. Connie, do you want to take that on for a moment from your perspective?
Sure. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that need and problem are kind of the same overall concept. I would say the one thing that's a little bit different is that we tend to look at it from a more holistic approach now, not just a single need, but how does it fit into a bigger picture in terms of product and identity and things like that. So, you know, I'm not in that space, so don't ask me about fashion. I would be your worst consultant. But in terms of need versus problem, I think it's really about kind of same thing, different wording, but looking from a bigger, kind of more holistic approach. That's what I would say.
Well, and the only thing I would add to that is that problem can be identified as where is the future moving and how can people feel better about fashion that doesn't add to the environmental crisis. So there's that intersection. So I think what's happening now is there's a greater intersection between the need as perceived by the customer and the challenge and problem as perceived by the greater good.
Okay,
And that,
cool.
and
Okay, yeah, because I think that will change a little bit of how I see or envisage where I want to take something that I want to do. Awesome. Thank you very much.
sure. Another question, thought, comment.
Jump in there because you don't want Lauren and I to get going because we could be here all night.
There will not be any space left.
Or any air in any room.
Hi guys, it's Stephanie Rodriguez. I'm a new activator and I am a startup CEO of a company called WanderSafe, and we make personal safety devices and an ecosystem with an app for women and vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm.
We've raised more than 3 million historically, but due to the pandemic, we're forced to pivot. We're looking at our next raise, and I loved the lead with the SWOT analysis kind of idea.
Mm-hmm.
My question was, how many competitors makes for a good SWOT analysis?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm going to also ask Connie, you to talk about that for a moment, and then I'll weigh in because I know
Sure.
you're actively doing this on a daily basis. So, and then I'll weigh in on kind of the broader perspective with many ventures. Yeah.
I personalize everything to the particular occasion. So sometimes it's more about who that competitor is than how many. So if I'm in batteries, right? So everybody knows the name Tesla. So I don't have to list 1,000. I say Tesla and Siemens and people know those competitors. So it depends, I think, partly on who you're pitching to and what you're trying to get across. And sometimes, I mean, you don't have to show every card. There might be competitors that you find a little bit more, you see potential problems in the future, but it doesn't mean you have to list them. Certainly not in your first occasion, your first conversation. Maybe you want to list ones that are a little more well-known and how you are well-positioned to gain market share from them. Because after all, you're not going to have 100% of the market. So, you don't have to show 100% of the competitors.
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's good to have both emerging, like what's coming that potentially isn't clear in the usual suspects, which demonstrates your capacity to be strategic.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Well, I'm going to, we want to honor everyone's time. I realize that it's morning where you are and you've got your whole day ahead of you. So I'm going to hand the mic back over to Finn, and Finn, hopefully you'll be able to close this out.
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to plug really quickly. There is another, for what's coming up, there's a learning circle on October 7th. I think it might be the 8th for you guys, actually. And that's with Sarah. And then there's another one in November that's with Tanya Lowe. She's also a venture. And I think in the chat, the links are there. But thank you all for showing up. And also we have just a small, if we could get your feedback or your insight or your reflections of how everything was, or just what you loved, just anything. So thank you very much. And I hope you have a good beginning of your day. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Question about slides. Where can they see the slides?
So the slides I will add into the follow-up email, which will also include a recording of this session. So
Finn, I'll send you my slides because I had them and I don't think I shared them with you. So
Thank you very much. From Sydney.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone, it's been fantastic.
Thanks so much.